So I've had a habit of being attached to the word tiny and attached to the word small for years. And it's something that's been coming up for me in recent months, really just the last year, half a year especially, where I was really attached to using that word as a qualifier to justify my choices to make it sound like I was doing these cool things, these beautiful, somewhat high vibrational things, but I was doing them in a small or tiny way to just make that sound like I wasn't too full of myself or I wasn't aiming or reaching for too much in the eyes of others. It was a very codependent word for me, using the word tiny and small. And granted, there was a genuine time in my life about 6 years ago where things were challenging. It was during the COVID-19 pandemic. Things were just more challenging and actually did make sense to sort of downscale my life a little bit, live smaller. I ended up buying a tiny house that's about 200 square feet. And it kind of felt like financial freedom at the time to essentially buy a very small, tiny house that had everything I need and nothing I didn't need, which was great and resonant for that time 6 years ago during the COVID pandemic where things were uncertain. It was a survival mechanism that I chose that worked really well. And I got a beautiful result from it. I actually love my tiny house a lot. It's beautiful. I've put a lot of effort and work into making it so beautiful, so resonant, so very much me. And at the same time, it's really small and I've outgrown it. I definitely just want more space. I want more closet space. I want more kitchen space. I want a bigger bedroom. I want a generous sized living room. I just have a combination washer dryer. It washes and dries everything, but it takes a really long time to do that because it's a combination washer and dryer. And it's had some issues. My husband's had to fix it a bunch of times, and thank God he's handy. But it's just been annoying over the years having to fix it and get it working again and have it take so long to finish a load of laundry. So, bigger house, I can have both of those. I can have two separate units. It doesn't have to be a combination washer and dryer. It can be a washer and dryer side by side or stacked, but whatever, a bigger house, I have more room. I have more space for my life. But of course, it makes sense when we're under a lot of strain or pressure to be attached, or if there's certain extenuating circumstances and conditions within the world that make it very challenging for a time. I think a lot of us were under extra pressure or stress during the COVID-19 pandemic. Things were uncertain at the time for a lot of us, job wise, security wise, for a whole bunch of complex, nuanced reasons that had to do with the pandemic. So that made sense. But in recent months, and even for the last few years, I've been feeling like I'm really outgrowing this space. As much as I love it, I want to keep this space, but I want to transform it into an Airbnb rental in the future on the land my husband and I purchased. The land that my husband and I purchased just last year, we're building that up. We're going to be building a bigger house there. I'm ready to step into that new life, that new vision, that new, bigger life and dream. But I have to say, what got me here to living so small wasn't just the COVID-19 pandemic. It was also a codependency habit that I had. I expressed this in past videos, some of the trauma that I grew up with, codependent patterns with my parents, having a narcissistic father, having a mom who wasn't very strong and didn't set healthy boundaries with him or with anyone and was very much a people pleaser. So she modeled that for me in a very strong way. She wasn't very present for me. She had a lot of internal challenges and she didn't express them in a healthy, loving way. She was down on herself. She was emotionally not present or there for me. Seeing her be so people pleasing with her friends and extended family members, it wired that into me that this is how I need to be in order to be liked. That was her specific reason for it. She was very much attached and addicted to being liked, being seen as good, as this good friend, as this good sister, as this good whatever. Like she had this strong attachment to needing to be liked and to people please all the time compulsively. And I definitely learned that from her as a survival strategy. And it got further wired in around my dad. If I wasn't trying to please him and appease him, There was criticism coming my way. There were punishments coming my way. It was if I didn't perform and behave and do things in the way that he expected me to and tried to be perfect enough, good enough to please him all the time, then he would emotionally shame me. He would be very punishing with his energy. So that wired in me from an early age that I needed to act a certain way. I needed to please people in a certain way. In addition to that, I had other relatives, family members who were narcissistic in their personalities to a degree and were very self involved, self focused. Nothing you did was right. You could tell they just didn't really care about you. You were there, but you were tolerated. Your presence was tolerated. And that's how my existence as a child was. I felt merely tolerated most of the time and not cared for, loved for who I was. And of course, this isn't to beat up our family or make them wrong. This is to acknowledge that it hurt. And as a child, we don't really know how to handle that. We internalize everything because it's safer to believe for a child, it's safer in a young mind to believe that there's something wrong with you versus that there's something wrong with the adults who are your parents or caregivers and are responsible for you, for your survival and safety as a child. It's a lot safer for a child to take on the belief that there's something wrong with me and I can change because that gives the child some feeling or sense of control. If I just do this better, or if I just please this person more, my dad, my mom, my aunt, my uncle, whatever, if I'm just more the way that they want me to be, if I just act like the perfect child or the perfect niece or nephew or grandchild or whatever, whoever that person in your life who's very difficult to please and has a narcissistic personality, or maybe there were multiple family members in your household where that was the case, or caregivers who were emotionally immature and not present and there for your needs. They were just too self involved. They didn't have the energy. Maybe they weren't real narcissistic in their energy, but they just didn't have the wherewithal to be present for you. And they didn't really know how to be a parent. They were still wrestling with a lot of their own childhood wounds. And that was coming out through their parts that were acting out in all these ways that felt unsafe for your nervous system as a child. And you felt like you really had to be mature beyond your years as a child. Sometimes you had to be a parentified child for that parent who didn't have their act together, so to speak, wasn't emotionally available or present for you. Maybe they neglected you emotionally or even physically in certain ways. So that was my experience, especially on the emotional front, more so than the physical front, but very much on the emotional front. And because of that, I learned a lot of codependent coping mechanisms. I learned how to be for my parents, for my aunts and uncles, how to act and behave like this good, acceptable child that they would approve of enough or tolerate better than me being my authentic self. So my authentic self got buried. And I learned that in order to do that, I really needed to be semi invisible. I needed to take up very little space. They didn't like it if I took up any space. Part of it was I was a smaller, petite child. I'm actually a little tall now. But as a kid, I was always kind of shorter. I'm 5'5", 5'6", thereabouts. But as a child, I was always shorter than my cousins, smaller than my cousins, the petite one. And my parents were small. Nobody ever thought I would get to be as tall as I am now. That's actually considered slightly tall for a fully grown adult, 5'5", 5'6", whatever. But regardless, I felt very small as a child, and I felt like I needed to make myself even smaller. And I also felt resentful and angry about that, that I had to make myself so small, but I wasn't allowed to show or express that. So that smallness was my default setting. And I learned to make myself even smaller in the company of parents and extended family members who really didn't want me to take up any space, who felt annoyed if I did take up any space or if I expressed some vibrant, creative aspect of myself. I think the only person in my family who did appreciate it when I expressed these more vibrant, alive parts of myself was my grandmother. So I at least had the one grandmother who seemed to genuinely encourage some of my creative expressions and my authentic self. I had these expressive parts, these artistic, creative, expressive parts. I like to sing. I like to be in plays. And I did up until a point, and then I just stopped. And after my first year of high school, it just didn't feel like I could anymore. I had a lot of unprocessed emotional baggage. I was starting to viscerally feel more at that time. And I just didn't feel safe in my being. So I stopped actually doing a lot of creative things around the age of 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, and it just slowly tapered off. And I just kind of gave it up, which was quite sad. But at the same time, I didn't feel safe expressing those parts of me. I felt like I needed to start thinking about going the path my dad wanted me to do, becoming somebody more responsible, thinking about maybe becoming a lawyer someday, a more serious job. All that said, I did take on an identity of making myself small, of playing small, of living small. And I didn't feel like it was safe to take up space in the world as I was. I felt like I needed to keep making myself small for other people. And I kept doing that for a long time following my teenage years. I didn't follow my passions. I took jobs that were nothing I really wanted to do. They were just jobs that I think society expected me to do, service industry jobs at first, and then social work type jobs later on, just more secure, which actually weren't even that secure, but socially accepted, secure jobs. And because I was a very empathetic person and I had learned how to people please so well, it felt like a natural fit to more of the social work type path, helping people in some capacity since I was so naturally empathetic. But one of the reasons I was so naturally empathetic was because of my wounding, because I had experienced a lot of adversity in my family structure because I had been teased and not accepted for who I was the way I was early on in life. I was always an oddball. I always felt out of place and weird. I think most kids experience some form of bullying. I experienced that. And some of it was in my family with my cousins and friends who weren't unconditionally loving and accepting of me. Most kids aren't unconditionally loving and accepting of their cousins or their peers. That is the case for most people. But because we don't have those structures that are supportive and genuinely loving early on, we learn that it's not okay to be ourselves. We learn that we need to hide our authenticity and that we need to make ourselves more pleasing, more palatable, more acceptable for other people so we won't get bullied further or so we won't get called out and put down and made to feel even smaller than we already felt in these circumstances. So, that was a survival mechanism that certain parts of me learned how to take on. These were protector parts. They were protecting these vulnerable parts of me that wanted to feel authentically loved, genuinely cared for, and seen as I was. So I developed protector parts that were really focused on making me look and feel and perform small. And I did that well into my 30s, mid 30s. One of the heaviest points in my life was in my mid 30s. And with circumstances in the world feeling a little bit more stressful and unpredictable, and things just being kind of chaotic in the broader world, especially with the COVID pandemic, it felt good to make myself really small and choose a small life on purpose. I really did feel like I was choosing it on purpose and being wise about this by choosing such a small house. It felt like security. I would always have this house. I wouldn't have to worry about working myself too hard. I might even be able to slow down with working a little bit. I might be able to have more time for meditation, for spiritual pursuits, for journaling. At the time, I was really into Advaita Vedanta spiritual stuff and listening to Muji every day. I absolutely still support all of that. So if you're into Advaita Vedanta, Buddhism, Muji, any kind of comes from the Ramana Maharshi kind of Hindu spiritual lineage. This is not a critique of that at all. I think it's beautiful to inquire into who we are. Who is this person right now speaking? Who do I feel myself to be? What is this identity? And to see through the identity and not be so identified with this construct or idea of who I think or take myself to be. I think that's incredibly valuable and beautiful. And so that was absolutely worthy. And I just want to say that. But at the same time, it actually felt like I was hiding there, and I think I've discussed this in a past video. I was hiding. This was again 6-ish years ago, 6, 7 years ago. I was hiding in this identity of playing small, of playing really spiritual. So my spiritual super ego was really involved in this identity of smallness, while I was on the surface and feeling in a way like I was letting go of my surface level identities and becoming more one with all that is, becoming more groundless, more everything and nothing all at the same time. While doing that, there was an identity that was getting more solidified. This was the identity of playing and making myself smaller. And that was because I just felt so unsafe. This was my body's spiritual way of trying to survive. So choosing a very small house at the time, like pretty much as small as you can go, 200 square feet. That's very small. You just have enough room for a bathroom, a kitchen, a loft bedroom, a tiny little living room. It's extremely small, but it had everything I needed, nothing I didn't need. When I first got it, it wasn't as beautiful as it is now. I put a lot of work into over this last 6 years, making it extra pretty and beautiful. But nonetheless, my identity in terms of that attachment to being small and settling was growing. And I also felt at the time like I was burnt out. I had gone to school for a long time, did some grad school, had been in school for a long time, had been working for a long time, especially in these helping type of professions, to be of service. I was very attached to being of service to others in a very empathetic, kind, loving way, which was very beautiful, don't get me wrong, but at the same time, I was so attached to just being liked and being good because it felt safe for me to be liked and good. And this extra layer of spiritualism, it anchored that in more. It solidified this identity of smallness. I need to be humble. I believe that I always needed to be humble and I needed to keep my head down, keep myself small. I think even Muji says that in one video. I don't want to misquote, but there was something I remember him saying, and that part of me that was so attached to being small probably misinterpreted and twisted his words because I don't think that's exactly what he meant. Put yourself lowly, I think he says, and that's just to get our egos to be not so full of ourselves and not so crazy, rapacious, greedy, whatever. But at the time, it was just extra attractive to me. And I think I might have twisted the meaning, the deeper meaning of that, and turned it into, okay, yes, the highest path is to not want anything, really, to not have any desire. I was coming to a space of having no desire, of having no goals, of settling for a very small life and a very small house. And that's exactly what I got. I got a very small house, which don't get me wrong is beautiful, but I'm going to be turning it into an Airbnb rental in a few years once we have our bigger house built. It will be over 1,000 square feet. So I'm really grateful for that. But nonetheless, I was just so attached to this small identity and putting myself lowly, which means not taking up space, not asking, not wanting, and using spiritual language and teachers I was listening to at the time to justify that identity and solidify it further. I was taking these spiritual concepts of the dharmic path of not wanting, which is also kind of anchored into Buddhism, like this path of non resistance, which is great. And at the same time, my ego got this hit. It got this like surge of energy off of, and it was really much a pride off of wanting so little, not having goals, needing so little, just getting by and not being vain in the least, not having an interest in any kind of greater, grander vision for my life. I would just live and die in this tiny house, wanting for very little, if anything, meditating, focusing on blending in with the oneness and the allness of life and the nothingness at the same time. And somehow that would make me worthy. Somehow that would make me good or better than if I was the kind of person who did want things, who did strive for things, who did have ambition. I really believed that ambition was not a high value, was actually something to shy away from, something that could pollute your nature. And I believe that people who lived too big, who wanted too much, who had big ambitions and desires were greedy. I thought they were just greedy. And that had a lot to do with the ideologies I had surrounded myself with. I had surrounded myself with a lot of like academic and humanistic ideologies and also spiritual ideologies that really had that kind of message, even if they didn't always directly say that in the literature. It was baked into it or implied to a degree, and also because I was so keen and already a believer of it and looking for more ideology and content and examples to buttress my already existing belief that wanting more and wanting a bigger life and having ambitions was a bad thing. I just wanted to believe that it was because at the time, it felt unsafe to even try for a bigger life. It felt like there was no way I could get there. I felt like there was no hope and there was no way. So I tricked myself further psychologically into believing that the highest path ultimately was to not want a bigger life, to want a very small, minimalistic life. I was into having as little as possible, quite frankly, doing as little as possible. I was living quite lethargically. I was overweight because of it. I wasn't moving enough. My vitality was low. I wasn't healthy. I did get myself a tiny home, which is great. And I do own the home and I'm grateful for it. And it is beautiful, but it's just not enough space. I absolutely want a bigger life and I'm willing and ready to own that and have been now for a while. But it's taken some time to really shift out of those old ideologies. It's really just about 2 years ago, maybe 2.5, that I started thinking the way that you hear me talking now. It took quite some time to unravel and undo that belief, but it was holding me hostage. I used the word small and tiny with a lot of pride in my voice. I was very attached and identified with being someone who had settled for small and tiny. And I was actually quite prideful of that. So I wasn't actually, ironically, despite all that effort, I wasn't actually becoming one with the all or nothingness. I really wasn't doing Vedanta any justice or becoming enlightened in any way. I wasn't earnestly really looking into this construct of identity in a true, deep spiritual way. I was attaching to certain aspects of spiritual culture, like the smallness, not needing, not wanting, not having desire, and how that was placed on a pedestal in certain spiritual traditions and how that was lauded or looked at as good. I was taking those things and also from ideologies that were aligned with stuff I had connected with and read and more humanities based graduate programs and my work that was aligned with that as well. I just took all of that, pieced it together, all of these values. I was very attached to these values of being good, being somebody really good, pious, somebody very acceptable and pleasing to others who would, of course, be safe because I wasn't aiming for much. I didn't threaten anyone in any way because people felt good around me. They felt, oh, well, I'm probably doing better than her. They just felt good around me because I was so meek in a way. I was keeping myself small and always trying to make myself invisible, which I had learned in childhood, make myself small and invisible around them just to make them feel good. I had learned how to do that around narcissists because that was my pattern. That was my survival mechanism to make myself invisible. This person who was just there as a support for them. And that was the only way I could be valuable or feel valuable was if I took up very little space, basically wanted nothing from anybody ever, and was just there in this compulsive, caring, supportive capacity for others. That was my identity. And not to say that this identity is bad, it's a stage of consciousness, it's a stage of awakening. It was certainly a big stage of my growth and of my learning. And ultimately, all of my experiences compelled me to start this channel, to shake these identities and ideologies loose, to become less and less identified, to see through it. It all served in a beautiful, wonderful way. But now, as I've unraveled that, as I've done a lot more somatic meditation, I prioritize taking care of myself. I've been putting myself first for the last year, 2 years, like 2 years, I would say, but even more so in the last year, and especially even more in the last 6 months. Once that ball of self care, it's a momentum. You don't wanna stop. You just wanna keep going, like, taking better and better care of yourself, and that's what I've been doing. I've been getting fit. I lost about 30 pounds now while retaining muscle. I still have a lot of strength here, a lot of muscle definition that I'm continuing to build. The excess weight that I was carrying from that time that I described before of feeling so low and keeping myself low on purpose so I would not offend anyone by my existence. I was legitimately afraid of offending people just by existing. I was afraid of taking up much space because I was afraid of people's reactions. I had so much trauma as a child of people being angry at me and shaming me so harshly just for expressing myself in very innocent ways, just creatively and being talented. I have a lot of natural talents, and I think some cousins were jealous of me, some friends were jealous of me. I also was naturally blessed to be quite attractive physically when I was young, and I think I still am now, but I think I had some friends that were jealous of that, one cousin too. There was some energy directed at me because of my natural physical expression, like some of my talents with singing and performance, and then the way I looked. But I internalized their criticalness, their reproach or disapproval. Really, they were just jealous and they had some narcissistic personalities and woundings that they projected at me. But I internalized it. If I want to be liked, if I want to stay safe in the company of friends, of family, of others, I need to make myself small. I need to not shine my light brightly. I need to dim my light dramatically. I need to ignore and pretend that my natural talents and beauty isn't there. And that was part of why I gained a bunch of weight. I didn't take care of myself for a long time in my 30s, especially, and to my 20s too. I kind of went on and off with that for some years. I did prioritize taking care of myself. And then there were other times, despite coming back to taking care of myself for a few years, I think in my early 30s, I dropped that off again because I hadn't actually worked through the intense pain, the emotional baggage. I hadn't done much somatic meditation at the time. I had done some radical forgiveness work, which was good. And I think that allowed me to come back to taking care of myself for a while in my 30s because I was letting go of poor relationship patterns to a degree and starting to feel better about myself. I had done a little of that, but not as nearly as much as I've done now and doing that more consistently for a longer amount of time. So radical forgiveness work absolutely does work. And I absolutely support it and back it 100%. But also the somatic work, the shadow release work, emotional work is very integral and important too. So doing both has really supported me and being able to own who I am more and more and be like, I'm never going back to people pleasing and dimming my light just so I can feel safe in the presence of others. I'm living my best life now in my 40s. I'm going to say I am 40. Actually, I'm over 40. My early 40s still, but getting closer to my mid 40s. Regardless, I'm just so grateful that I've transformed and there's a lot more to do. This is never done. But I don't feel like I'm ever gonna be using the word small and tiny with pride again. Not that there's anything wrong with small or minimalism or tiny. Sometimes it's appropriate to go smaller. But if it's compulsive, it's become your personality to use the word small or tiny or to qualify everything you do and say. If you notice yourself making ourselves small and qualifying everything we're doing because we're acutely aware, if you're a sensitive, kind of empathic, codependent type of personality person, you are going to be more likely to be qualifying everything you're saying and minimizing what you've done so other people don't feel threatened by you. So you don't feel that they'll feel like you are too much or that you've done too much. And you also don't want to sound pompous. You're trying so hard not to sound pompous or big or even proficient that you're dimming your light way too much and you're keeping yourself really small. You're minimizing everything that you do. Like you feel this compulsive need to almost put it down or to hide it or to just brush it off. That's even more extreme, to brush off every great, awesome thing that you do. If someone compliments something you do or compliments your outfit or compliments your hair or compliments your home or compliments something, don't brush it off. Own it. Say, yes, thank you. I love my house. Thank you. Yes, I'm very pleased with my hair. And thank you. Just thank you is all you have to say instead of minimizing everything about you or pretending that it's not even true because you were taught to do that so you could be more socially acceptable. I know I was to just not accept compliments. I was taught that by my mom. She thought it was good to not be complimented and to always downplay herself. And it was a very unfortunate habit. It's a habit that a lot of women have unfortunately internalized. And also to always be saying It's something small and just qualifying everything you do as small or as tiny or as whatever, or be extra proud that you're living so compact and tiny. It's not necessarily a good thing. It means that there's something in you that is afraid of taking up space in the world. That was the case for me. I was terrified to take up any space in the world. I was terrified to be seen in my authentic light, to shine my light bright, to do anything that wasn't a kind of a status quo. I was hiding. I was really dying inside. My spirit and soul were dying inside. And now I'm moving in the exact opposite direction. I'm ready to grow bigger in my life, but while actually my body has been growing smaller, more muscular, more fit, more tone at the same time. I'm ready to embody and live my best, brightest life and own who I authentically am and not make myself smaller, not tone myself down, not qualify everything I say anymore. And I haven't been for a while. For the last year or thereabouts, I've been really not using that word so much, and especially not with any pride and not overusing the word small and tiny. It just doesn't feel right anymore. So I haven't been. But it was something I did for a long time. And I also felt full about how minimally I was living. My spiritual ego was really getting a hit off of how small I'm being. Look how demure in a way I'm being. Look how I don't need anything. I have this tiny little house and I'm happy and I'm content. And more people should be like this because you're not taking up space. You're giving back to the world by taking up so little space and by needing so little. And like, you should just see me as so spiritual, everybody, because of that. And I'm not a threat to anyone because look how good I am. Like, it was kind of ridiculous. There was no real freedom in that identity. It was very limited. And my ego was feeding very much into that identity of being good through being so small and keeping myself so small and being so nice all the time to people. Overly nice, performatively nice, not genuinely nice. Obviously, be genuinely kind, but also be gregarious if that's within you. If you have a big, bright personality, if you have this beautiful light to shine, don't dim and hide that. Be your authentic self more and more. I feel like the path to doing that is to do the shadow work, do the radical forgiveness work, heal those past wounds with your family, because that is where it all originated in childhood. Those times where you felt unseen, unloved, unheard, unacknowledged, and it didn't feel safe to show up as your authentic self. It didn't feel safe to express yourself, to shine your light. You felt you had to make yourself different, small, contort yourself into these little shapes so others wouldn't attack you with their words or sometimes with their bodies. So this is a wake-up call for those who needed to hear the message to please do the inner work. Please question, is this a habit I have, making myself so small, minimizing everything I do, how I show up so I can sound good, performing this identity of overgiving and being overly performatively nice to people. It's one thing to be kind and to listen authentically, but you also want to know when to set boundaries because some people, especially if you're an intuitive, sensitive, empathetic person and you haven't healed those codependent wounds and those people pleasing wounds yet within yourself, you're going to attract people who are going to want to take advantage of your energy, your overgiving, your ability to listen so long to whatever story they have to tell. Usually it's a victim story or a trauma story or whatever that they expect you to just listen endlessly to and then go with a very empathetic, yeah, oh, I'm sorry. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Oh, I'm so sorry that happened to you over and over. When you're like, this isn't actually good for your consciousness to endlessly listen to someone else's droning on victim story. And I had to unfortunately listen to that in my mom because she was very attached to her victim stories and she wouldn't really share them with people outside of the household. But when it was just me in the house, I think she felt like in a way she owned me and I was her daughter. So she could just do whatever she wanted. She could just dump it all on me. Like I was her therapist and that was me being a parentified child for her. It was very exhausting. When I was a teenager onward, she just unloaded all of her low vibrational victim story, victim consciousness stuff onto me for years and years. And it was really exhausting. And finally, in my 20s, I got away from it and it was great, but it was hard. It was hard to detach from that. But nonetheless, I developed a coping mechanism of listening. And my dad had that to a degree too, but more narcissistically. He doesn't like to admit weakness in himself. So it'd be more a version of complaining about how everybody else is wrong or broken. He would just expect me to empathetically listen to him forever and endlessly drone on about how this bad thing happened and this like this person. But nothing was ever wrong with him, of course, because yeah, he's perfect. It was insane. But nonetheless, you may have some patterns like that with your family members. And it's a good sign if you're in a space where you can kind of just laugh about it now, like helpfully laugh about it, like I'm doing right now. It's like you've actually worked through it. It's not triggering you like it used to. It used to be painful to talk about how my parents were. And that's because I hadn't released a lot of that baggage, a lot of that pain and trauma from endlessly being a sounding board for my parents, and which actually carried over into my work because I learned early on how to be so empathetic. I learned how to be a good listening ear for people, how to nod my head and be thoughtful and help them feel seen and heard. And meanwhile, I never got hardly a word in edgewise unless it was like to tell them, you're doing good and blah, 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 blah. And I'm so sorry that happened. It was always me being in service to others, which of course made sense if I was naturally good at that from my trauma because of my trauma, that I would go into career paths where I was put in a position to always be empathizing and listening to others. But there comes a point where it's like, oh my gosh, I don't want to hear another person's victim story or trauma story ever again. Because I honestly, I don't care. And there's nothing wrong with not caring, quite frankly. It might sound harsh. Judge me. I don't care. You can judge me. It's fine. But there comes a point where you need to just take back your energy for yourself, and you need to no longer be available to listening to other people's victim stories endlessly in a loop. It's one thing if you have a genuine friend who's not trying to take advantage of you in that way, of you always being a sounding board for them, and they just genuinely have a challenge and you listen to them for half an hour, fine. But then you have to cut it off. If it starts going over that, then they're just telling the same story over and over again. There are points where you need to have boundaries around your time. You need to have boundaries around your energy. Your energy is not to be used by energy vampires, by people who aren't capable of healthfully working with their own energies and taking responsibility for their own energy and their own emotions and healing and working with them. Your energy is for you, is for your healing. It's for you to live your greatest life and what's in your heart and spirit and soul to pursue. Those paths that are waiting for you, those divine creative gifts that you came to birth into this world. That is what your energy needs to be more reserved for if you're hearing this and you haven't really taken much action in terms of living a more aligned life that's for you, where you're doing work that you genuinely love, that you're genuinely good at, that you came here to do, that lights up your soul. And it may be in some kind of a helping profession ultimately, but if it is, then you need to learn how to set boundaries with the people that you're helping and you're supporting. Because don't get me wrong, I still think I'm really good at supporting people, helping, coaching, all of that. But I'm now channeling it in a new way. I'm not interested in just being an endless sounding board for someone's victim stories and trauma. Quite frankly, a lot of people are just not willing or ready to work through that. So they're just looking for another person, an ear to project it onto because they think it's going to make them feel better, but it actually really doesn't. Usually you want to tell it again. If you've told it once, you want to tell it again and again because it becomes addictive to keep telling the story because it anchors it in further and then you're subconscious, you believe it more, and then it anchors in that identity for you more. You want to tell another person, another person. You know people like that, where they literally tell the same kind of story all day long to different people that they come across. It's not a healthy place to live in, and it's a very low victim consciousness vibration. And you don't want to make your energy or yourself available for that in any real capacity. You want to have hard boundaries around that, especially around people who want to just dump their stuff, their problems, their challenges onto you or brag endlessly about whatever that would be more of a narcissistic personality. They just want to go on and on about how great they are. Okay, you're not available for that either. Your energy is for you. It is your vital energy. You need to take full responsibility for that. Channel it into pursuits that matter to you. What is it that you came here to birth? What creative gifts? What were you naturally good at as a child that you forgot about, that you eventually stopped doing? That was the case for me. Like I said, with singing and performing, and it's taken up new expressions now. One of them is YouTube. I like being a YouTuber. I like sharing my insights and wisdom. So that feels very aligned, as well as I've talked about fitness. I really love fitness, love getting fit, love getting stronger. building muscle, I wanted to share that your energy is for you. And the second that you decide I'm no longer available to be the sounding board, to play this codependent people pleasing game, to keep endlessly listening to people when you really don't want to, but you're just making yourself listen to people because you think it would feel rude or impolite and you don't actually know how to get out of the conversation. You feel kind of trapped in the conversation with this intense, energetic person and you don't know how to set a boundary. That's the time. Even if the person's offended, set the boundary unless they're holding a gun to your head, unless they have a weapon. It's actually more safe to set a boundary instead of to keep wasting your energy. It signals to the universe, it signals to your soul that you don't value your time and energy if you're available and just letting somebody drone on. It doesn't matter who that person is, even if you're close to them, even more reason to set a boundary and let them know what you're available for, energy wise, time wise, and what you're not. And if it's somebody that you're not close to and you don't care about continuing a relationship with, then just end it, move on, end it. If they try to connect with you again in the future, just ignore them, move on, go do your own thing. Don't allow yourself to keep getting hung up. Don't feel like you need to be good for everyone anymore. The second you start healing that inner child who's hurting, who felt like it had to be good for everybody, to stay safe, to stay secure, to be okay, to be liked enough so it wouldn't be harmed or threatened or attacked. The second you start healing that energy within you by doing this deeper work, and I will link some videos here in the comments for past videos I've done that are both a radical forgiveness type work, which is very powerful, as well as a somatic meditation video that you could do, and a shadow work video that I recorded, a process there that you could do. But I will link those videos in the comments. So that's a good place to get started. Get started by doing some inner work, by touching base with your wounded inner child that's hurting, that part of you that feels like it always needs to be on and perfect for other people, or always available to listen and be empathetic and kind as a compulsive habit because you're afraid not to. You're afraid to take back your time and energy, and you don't really believe that you're worthy and valuable in and of your own self and your own rights, but you are. That is a complete and utter falsity, that your time and your energy isn't valuable. And that's only because you've been treating yourself and your time and energy like it isn't valuable. You're continuously signaling and anchoring in further and further into your nervous system, into your being and body, that this is how I need to be. This is how you need to be safe enough, to be liked, to be okay, because you don't value your own time and energy and you don't feel like you're worthy of more. You feel like you have to settle to survive. And you actually don't. If you really take the time to question that, take the time to question these beliefs that you have, these assumptions that you have, and it seemed like that was the case in childhood. It probably was for you, for me, for a lot of us. We had to act a certain way in order to survive our childhoods. That was then. This is now. Really check in and see, is that still the truth now? Be very honest with yourself and really reflect and do the inner work. And please start meditating on a more consistent basis. Please start doing some radical forgiveness work to radically forgive both those people in your life who wounded you so much and created these parts in you that actually inspired the creation of these parts in you that now feel maladaptive. But you do have the power to actually pull that back and change. You are not stuck in any identity, any performative role that you are currently expressing indefinitely. You do have the power to see it. That seeing it, that is the first step, just becoming aware of how you're enacting your identity, how you're being, how you're showing up, who you're overgiving to, who you're people pleasing, who you're being codependent with, how you're making yourself small. Just becoming aware is the very first step. And then progressively and slowly seeing those habits and that compulsion and doing it less and less, not beating yourself up when you do it again, but instead of beating yourself up, be grateful that you saw it this time. Don't beat yourself up. Give yourself some grace and be grateful that you saw it instead of beating yourself up, and be like, okay, I'm becoming more aware of that, aware of this pattern in myself and how I'm showing up. And I don't like it. It doesn't feel right anymore. I really want to prioritize taking better care of myself, showing up for myself in a more powerful way, challenging myself to grow into a greater, bigger, larger version of yourself that you feel more authentically aligned with and connected to, that feels right for you. So you can share those greater gifts you have, and you don't feel like you have to compulsively perform and keep working in roles that are misaligned for you and your soul, that you don't love, jobs you don't love. Keep talking and connecting with people that you don't really care that much for, but they tolerate you, you tolerate them, or they just like what you can do for them. But it's a one-sided relationship. There's nothing that you're really getting from it except the fact that you feel better about yourself because you're always so nice to this person, but this person is draining your energy and they're not a healthy person to continue keeping in your life. Or maybe this job isn't, and the particular actors that are involved in that job, that maybe there are some toxic patterns there. I think a lot of us have had that show up in our jobs in the past or in the present. So I'm just asking you to really look at this, to look at your particular patterns and how you're showing up, and to start giving more time and attention to yourself and less time and attention to scrolling, to checking out. We all have our habits of checking out. I've expressed what mine are before. That's been overeating, watching too many movies, a little bit of a shopping addiction was a distraction, different various things, different for everybody, but whatever it is for you, give that time back to yourself by doing that inner work, doing that deeper dive, and showing yourself that you're willing and you're ready and you're here and you're consistently every time you do, even if it's not every day to start, it's every other day or a couple times a week just to start. Get in the habit and the pattern of giving to yourself. And maybe just starting doing something that you really love, something you enjoy, that you have, that you made excuses to not do for yourself. Maybe that's walking. Maybe that's eating a certain healthy thing, or maybe it's a new skin routine. Maybe it's going to the gym. But whatever that is for you, the thing that you've been avoiding doing that would make you feel like you're worth taking care of, like daily walking, that's a habit I integrated since December, and I'm so happy I'm doing it. And I've done it every day consistently since. So I'm so grateful for that. And that was a great way I started giving back to myself and starting to feel more worthy. And then it made me want to do other healthy habits, take up other healthy habits for myself as well. So please start with a healthy habit, something that you feel would be really good for you, that would make you feel like you value yourself more, make you feel like you matter more, like you're more worthy, and keep doing that habit. And even if you fall off the wagon and you don't do that habit, or you don't invest in that thing right away, don't punish yourself. Just come back to that healthy habit, invest in that particular thing that would make you feel more fulfilled and worthy without punishing yourself. That's the old energy. That's what you learn in childhood, to be punished for actually taking care of yourself or not following through or doing something. It's time to stop punishing yourself for existing, for wanting what you want, for choosing to take care of yourself. And even if you choose not to take care of yourself right now, but you do say next week or in a couple days, and you're just like, no, I'm going to do it now, but you didn't do it right away. Don't beat yourself up for not doing it right away either. Just come back, say the Ho'oponopono prayer around this if there's some mental energy. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. I love you. I thank you. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. I love you. I thank you. That is one simple meditative phrase that you can say to yourself, the Ho'oponopono prayer. I'm sorry. I love you. I thank you. Please forgive me. Can just say that a couple times to yourself, whatever this thing was, whatever was hurting. I do that a lot during or right after my shadow release work meditations, somatic meditations, because there's a lot of clearing that's happening there. There's a lot of remembering some of the pain of my past, but I'm holding it in a light of love. I'm holding that pain in a light of grace. And when you do that, when you hold whatever pain that you've had, this pattern of pain, this memory of pain from your childhood, this circumstance, this event that you recall, or a pattern that's been in your system, maybe of playing so small, which that was a big one for me. When you hold that in a light of grace and love for yourself, and you say the Ho'oponopono prayer, that is very powerful in and of itself. So I am going to leave it on that note. Have a blessed day. Thank you.